They said I left Mr. Henderson to suffer, and I sat there with my hands folded, nodding like maybe I had. That was the trick of it. Say something awful enough, and watch the quiet ones swallow it. I'd been the quiet one my whole life. Keep the peace, keep the charts neat, keep my head down until I got my nursing application off the ground. But in the meeting room at Winterfield, under strip lights that made everyone look a shade sicker, the air smelled like antiseptic and rubber gloves, and the rain needled the window so hard the glass seemed to buzz. Someone had parked a paper cup of machine coffee by my elbow like an offering. It had a greasy ring that bled into the printout underneath my name. "Emma," Miss Klein said, smile tight, voice soft for the kill. "Walk us through your rounds last night." Behind her, the vending machine hummed like a trapped wasp. Down the corridor, the floors were scuffed where the hoists dragged. Outside, gulls screamed over the car park, and the sea wind pressed damp against the building. Late autumn making everything ache. I could feel the other carers watching without looking. Jody twisting her ring. Mark pretending to read a staffing rota half blank because 3 people had called out again. Understaffed meant you ran on fumes and luck. Understaffed meant you swallowed your anger when someone dumped their tasks on you because you were good at ticking boxes and not making drama. I did my checks at 10, midnight, 2, 4, I said. He was settled, warm, respiration steady. "You didn't go in at 1? Miss Klein's eyebrow did a small, elegant climb. The home manager, Mr. Bryson, didn't look at me at all. He stared at the list in front of him like it was a joke he didn't get. I could feel the shame in my throat before the anger. I hated fights. I hated the part of me that wanted to apologize just to make everyone relax. "No," I said. "But Arthur Henderson deteriorated sometime after 12:30, Miss Klein said. "No one saw him until 3. I had the charts. I always had the charts. I had the little notes I left, the tiny, tidy ticks in the boxes. I slid my folder open, the one I carried like a shield, and showed them my rounds. Times, observations, initials. Then I showed them the medication record. Mr. Henderson was supposed to get 10 milligrams at 21 o'clock. The MAR sheet in the packet said he'd been given 20 milligrams at 21:30. My initials in a neat hand that looked like mine if you blurred your eyes and wanted it to be. "I didn't give that," I said. My voice came out too soft, too polite. "Be nice. Be reasonable. Be ruined, Ms." Klein tilted her head. "So who did?" The batch number on the line didn't match any of the bottles on the shelf log. I checked. I went down the antiseptic corridor, past the faded family photos on nightstands, the worlds people build when their real ones go. And I opened the metal cabinet and counted labels until the numbers tangled. The storm outside chewed the sky. Inside, the fluorescence hummed at a pitch that made me want to cry. I tried to find Lena. She'd been on meds with me at 9. She dodged me, ducked into a resident room, and didn't come out. I asked maintenance for the camera footage from the med ring, and the wall-mounted TV said maintenance. I refreshed my login to the charting system, and it bounced me. Access restricted. No explanation. No apology. Options spun and nodded. Go to Miss Klein? She'd already decided I was the easy culprit. File a complaint? Against who? The ghost that borrowed my hand? Call Mr. Henderson's daughter and tell her we were chewing up her dad's life with paperwork and rolled eyes? The thought made my ribs tighten. I wanted to protect, not burn everything down. I wanted to be the girl who smoothed sheets and calmed storms, not the one who lit them. At midnight, the building went quieter in that fake way care homes do. TVs mumbling under doors, slippers whispering across linoleum. I slipped into the tiny office off the med room, the one that smelled like stale coffee and printer ink, And there it was in the tray, a freshly printed MAR sheet from Mr. Henderson. The paper was still warm. A coffee ring bled into the corner. And under the 2130 entry, there was the faintest ghost of eraser crumbs where someone had rubbed something out and written me back in. My phone buzzed. No name, no photo, just a number and 4 words. Stop digging. Down the hall, a door clicked open like an answer. The fluorescent lights in the corner of the elderly ward flickered, casting a harsh glare on everything. The white walls, the worn linoleum floor, and the collection of charts that cluttered my desk. I was 33, and this was my life. Emma, nurse, working the night shift in a care home that felt more like a labyrinth of forgotten souls than a sanctuary for the elderly. The air was thick with the faint odor of antiseptic and something else, something unplaceable that clung to the back of my throat. I always felt like I was walking through a haze, half awake, half aware, caught somewhere in between. I understood the rhythms of the place by now, the way the creaking beds turned into a symphony of groans and whispers, the bustle of voices muffled behind closed doors. The silence of the night held its own echoes, the distant chime of a code blue alert ringing out, breaking the stillness like a thunderclap. I could almost feel the weight of each life I cared for, pressing on my chest, heavy and unrelenting. But it wasn't just the responsibilities of the job that loomed over me. It was everything beyond these walls. A year ago, I had put my nursing aspirations on the kind of. I had done my best to juggle it all. The late-night shifts, the phone calls to my mom in another city, who couldn't grasp how I had gotten so caught up in an adult life laden with mess and chaos. Friends faded into the background, leaving me to shoulder the weight alone, a constant reminder of the warmth I yearned for but never quite reached. There were whispers in my care home, small snippets of talk about the aggressive relatives who sometimes turned up ready to fight if their loved one didn't get the attention they thought they deserved. I had seen it escalate once, an irate husband screaming in a corridor, the care staff backpedaling like we were all suddenly in a predator-prey scenario. As I moved through my rounds, the patients were faces I recognized, each with a story. Mr. Samuels, who hummed old jazz tunes, and Mrs. Patel, who told the best tales from her childhood in India, things that warmed my core even in the chill of the place. I saw them for who they were, not as bedden. As I lingered by Mr. Henderson's door, my stomach knotted again. I pulled out my phone, that ominous text still echoing in my mind. Stop digging. It felt more like a threat than a mere request. I could sense the walls tightening around me, the broken pieces of the puzzle I hadn't put together yet, teasing me from the edges. The nursing home, once a refuge for the weary, felt like a trap closing in, and I had no idea what would happen next. The fluorescent lights buzzed as I stood in the nurse's station, my heart racing. I'd just finished my rounds and was still reeling from that ominous text, "Stop digging." I took a breath, grounding myself, scanning the care home like a hawk. Something didn't feel right. First, it was just that nagging feeling, but now it was building into a loud crescendo. I made my way toward Mrs. Bickle's room first, the sweetest lady you could ever meet. But as I pushed the door open, my usual soft knock turned to an uneasy creak. My stomach twisted. Mrs. Bickle was hunched over in her chair, her hands trembling as she struggled with her cup of tea. "Emma, dear," she said, her voice weak, I think I dropped my medicine." I could see the little pill bottle rolled under the desk, out of her reach. "Just a moment, Mrs. Bickle. I'll get it for you," I said as I bent down. But just then Dr. Hayes strolled in, his coat flapping as if he were in a hurry, his face a mask of impatience. He glanced only briefly at Mrs. Bickle before his cold gaze landed on me. "What are you doing, Emma? Why hasn't this patient received her medications?" I straightened up, feeling heat rise to my face. "I'm just getting her medication, Dr. Hayes." And why are you still at this stage in your career? He continued, each word sharper than the last, like knives cutting through my dignity. She shouldn't have to wait. It's unprofessional and frankly unacceptable. His dismissal echoed off the walls, making my skin prickle. If you've ever been unjustly accused, you know exactly how I felt, like the walls were closing in, suffocating. I'm getting it sorted now, I managed, trying not to let my anger seep through. But it was hard. Dr. Hayes had a way of making everyone feel small. Get it sorted then, he snapped, and before I could respond, he barged past me, leaving behind a cloud of condescension. I could almost hear Mrs. Bickle's fragile heart break at his words. She shifted uncomfortably at his retreat, her eyes wide, filled with concern. "Don't let him get to you, dear," she whispered, but her voice was trembling. In that moment, I realized it was only the beginning. I turned to Mrs. Bickle and knelt down beside her, gripping the bottle tightly in my hand. "I won't let him treat you like that again," I murmured, pushing down the fury that threatened to bubble over. I made a mental note to write everything down in the medical record, every neglect, every slight. I wanted evidence and accountability. But as I stepped out of Mrs. Bickle's room, I collided with Mrs. Jensen's family in the corridor. 3 of them, all looking unsettled, their eyes darting. "Here's our mother. She's been waiting too long for her pain medication," one of them yelled, crossing her arms. I felt like a rubber band stretched to its breaking point. "Your mother has her meds scheduled for a specific time, and I'll bring them to her shortly," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. The tension coiled tighter. That's when I noticed the bruises on Mrs. Jensen's hands. More than just the wear of age. Marks of neglect no one had bothered to document. Maybe you understand the pain of seeing someone fragile being ignored. Just then a shout echoed from the staff room. "Can someone cover this floor? We can't have a patient waiting, again." Jody was frantically trying to wrangle another shift change while Mark slumped, looking too exhausted to respond. The mounting chaos made it a farce of our already strained night. It felt like we were all spectators to our own inadequacies. "Fine, I'll take my mother to the lounge," one of the family members huffed, bitterness in her tone, and with that, they strode off, all indignation and urgency. In that moment, I felt something shift in me, an unyielding calm in the midst of the storm that threatened to tear the care home apart. I noted everything in the record, pen gliding across the paper with cultivation. I wasn't going to slip. I hadn't come this far to be beaten down. I turned my gaze toward the incoming tide of patients and families, aching for the care they deserved. And it was in that silence that everything began to collapse. I could feel it, tension brewing, like a storm gathering on the horizon. My hand was steady, but my mind raced with all the lives I couldn't let slip away unobserved. I tucked that nagging fear way down deep, holding on to the small flame of determination flickering in my chest. Little did I know that this attitude would put me against the entire care home. As I walked back toward the nurse's station, the heaviness of the air pressed in, and I understood. It was only a matter of time before someone else felt the brunt of it all, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already caught in the net of repercussions waiting to ensnare me. In that instant, destiny was already decided, and I still didn't know. The fluorescent lights flickered again as I returned to the nurse's station, my mind a whirl of anxiety and dread. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could keep the storm at bay. I thought I had a handle on it all. It was like gathering a safety net for myself, a way to ensure I wouldn't fall. But I had no idea it was still going to get worse. I settled beside my desk, the clutter of charts and paperwork a familiar comfort. For a fleeting moment, the noise of the world outside the care home seemed to close in around me, muffling the chaos inside. But that lull was short-lived. A commotion broke out down the hall, voices raised, an unmistakable tension piercing through the air like shards of glass. It sent a jolt through me, and I found my feet moving even before I processed the urgency behind it. As I rounded the corner, I spotted Mrs. Jensen's family in a tight cluster, their faces flushed with anger. "This is unacceptable. Our mother has been waiting far too long for her pain relief." One of them, the daughter who had already branded me with indignation, stepped forward, pointed an accusatory finger in my direction. I swallowed, the weight of their collective gaze heavy on my chest. "I'm so sorry, I planned to bring it shortly." But it was too late. Dr. Hayes appeared out of nowhere, the sneer on his face unmistakable. "What's the problem here?" he barked, short and sharp. His interruption felt like a knife, slicing through whatever fragile peace I had constructed. "She's not getting care. It's negligence, Dr. Hayes," the daughter shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. All eyes turned to me, the silence amplifying my heartbeat. I could almost feel the walls of the corridor closing in, suffocating me under the scrutiny. The doctor stepped closer, eyes blazing. "Emma, you are responsible for this. You should have known better." His words hung in the air, sticking to my skin like a starched lab coat that had seen better days. I felt the heat of humiliation prickling at the back of my neck. I'm so sorry," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. Just saying the words felt like a betrayal, an admission of guilt that I wasn't entirely sure I deserved. I planned to check the schedule, but the words dissolved. My panic made it hard to articulate. "Right," Dr. Hayes cut me off, impatience spilling over. "I don't want to hear excuses. Get your act together." His sharp tone was like an unwelcome whip crack echoing through the corridor. I nodded, the humiliation pooling in my chest. I would have taken any opportunity to slink away, to disappear into the sterile walls around me. But it didn't end there. The family's eyes bore down on me, their silent stares a bleak reminder of my failings. I turned, forcing my legs not to falter, but I could already feel the ghost of Dr. Hayes's words clinging to me, suffocating my resolve. Returning to the nurse's station, I desperately rifled through charts, my fingers scrambling to find anything, evidence, explanations. But the more I searched, the more tangled everything felt. Care records, the ink curling and fading, stared back at me, each tick and line an indictment. I crumpled one sheet in my palm. I tried to shake it off, tried to convince myself that I could still make it right. But just as I felt the flicker of hope, a ringing phone erupted in the silence, jolting me from my thoughts. It was the head office. I answered, praying it was a call to discuss relief or understanding. "Is this Emma?" The voice was clipped, rehearsed. My heart sank. "I need to inform you about a serious complaint regarding your conduct at the care home. We've had several reports concerning the treatment of your patients and inadequate medication oversight. This will be documented officially." As the words dripped like poison into my ears, I leaned against the desk, my knees threatening to buckle. This wasn't the way it was supposed to be. I had fought so hard to maintain the dignity I felt slipping away. And then a commotion erupted from the staff room. A nurse literally banged a folder on the counter, charts scattering like fallen leaves. "We're getting hell from management about late medications, and they're pointing fingers at you, Emma. They say you've been reckless." My heart sank. It was as if every inch of progress I'd made was obliterated, replaced with an avalanche of blame and scorn. I could see the disdain in the eyes of my coworkers, the frustration and anger that they had been forced to share in my missteps. I felt grabbed by a force I couldn't see, pulling me into a pit of despair. The walls felt like they were colliding, heavy and unyielding. I took a breath, summoning the last of my strength. But time felt warped, like an elastic band stretched just before it snaps. "Enough," I shouted, the suddenness of my voice catching even me off guard. "This isn't one person's fault. We are all under pressure. We're all trying to keep each other afloat in this mess." The silence that followed was deafening. I glanced around, desperate for any sign of understanding. But as faces turned toward me, they wore an expression of discomfort. I was on display in a cage of judgment, and it felt like every ounce of support evaporated. And that's when I heard a voice that would change everything. "Emma," it rasped from the dark recesses of the corridor, a sound that cut through the mounting chaos. It was familiar, yet distant. It was Mr. Henderson's voice from the other side. For a moment, all of my fears hung in the balance, waiting to fall as the tension thickened to almost tangible levels. What would he say? Would it add to my undoing, or pull me back from the brink? The air felt as thick as molasses when I turned back around, the weight of 100 eyes boring into my back. I was trapped in a spectacle, a flawed performance destined to be remembered but never applauded. At that moment, it didn't matter that I had tried my best. It was already too late for that. "Emma," the silence whispered, "what are you going to do now?" The hall was buzzing with anxiety and indignation. Dr. Hayes stood there, smirking slightly, basking in the chaos he had crafted. The arrogance rolled off him like the very antiseptic stench that filled our home. The smell of something forcibly sanitized but alive with rot underneath. I wanted to shrink away, to fade into the wallpaper. "Emma," he continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "do you think you can just ignore responsibility while your patients are left waiting for crucial medications?" Each word felt like a whip, wrapping tighter and tighter around my throat, squeezing the air from my lungs. I had no answer, no retort that could alter the course of how he had framed this moment. I could feel Mrs. Bickle's gaze behind me, hear her frail voice echoing in my mind, "Don't let him get to you." But the truth was, I was already getting to me. "Dr. Hayes, with all due respect," I finally managed to stutter. "I was managing multiple patients, as you know. We're short-staffed. We're struggling." "Spare us the excuses," he interrupted, waving one hand dismissively, as if brushing away an annoying fly. The crowded corridor swelled with murmurs, the spectators leaning in, hungry for blood. "You had one job, Emma. One job. It isn't that difficult." Behind him, I could see some of my colleagues fidgeting. Jody stood with her arms crossed, her lips pressed together so tightly I wondered if it hurt. Mark was pretending to be absorbed in paperwork, but I could tell he was listening. But his eyes flickered toward me, the embodiment of internal conflict written all over his face. In that moment, I felt transparent, like they could see the cracks forming in my carefully curated facade. Their judgment clawed at me, suffocating. "Your incompetence has become a real issue," Dr. Hayes continued, raising his voice for all to hear, pointing a finger at me like it was a weapon. "We might need to discuss your future here." It felt like an avalanche rolling downhill, and I was at the bottom, waiting to be buried beneath it all. "Please, just give me a chance to explain." "Enough," he shouted, and the finality of that word ripped the last shred of resolve from my chest. The air sucked out of the room like a void, swallowing my trembling thoughts. I glanced around, half expecting someone to come to my rescue or say something. Anything to alleviate the weight of this ugly moment. But no one stepped forward. My stomach churned as I could hear muffled accusations flickering around me. Pieces of whispers, like broken glass cutting through the silence. "She's careless. How could she? What a disgrace." They might as well have been sharpening their knives, preparing to tear me apart, piece by piece. Dr. Hayes leaned in closer, an unholy glint in his eye. "I'm not going to let your negligence go unpunished. We could be losing our license here." His words rang out like a death knell, and I felt the earth shift beneath me. Would they really do that? Could he really have that power over my life? Our lives? The chaos of the night shifted, a storm brewing within me, and I felt that nasty fire of injustice ignite. But even as my heart quickened, as anger surged like static electricity through my blood, the flickering thought of surrender loomed. Was it worth fighting? Would anyone even care? Maybe I should just walk away, apologize profusely, disappear into the shadows, where I wouldn't have to face this wilting scrutiny. But then I pictured Mrs. Bickle helpless in her chair, the fury in the eyes of Mrs. Jensen's family, the anxieties of countless others hanging in the air like that acrid smell of antiseptic. It snapped me back, a string pulled taut, thrumming with the resolve I thought I had lost. "I won't just accept responsibility for this, Dr. Hayes," I said, my voice shaking but resolute. "Not without addressing the larger issues here. Conditions, staffing, the entire system that expects us to care for people without lifting a finger to support us. This isn't just on me." Anger and fear wove a thick tapestry of defiance deep within me, and just as it threatened to spill over, reality sank its teeth in again. These weren't just casual comments anymore. This could ruin everything. My mind wandered to suspension, lawsuits, loss of my license. Yet, I still pushed forward. We're all here working ourselves to the bone, trying to provide something for our patients that's slowly being taken from us. They deserve better. With every word, I felt the tension in the air shift slightly, and I dared to hope that someone might jump in. But then, the silent audience only observed, watching me battling the storm without even a hint of wind at their backs. They waited to see what would emerge in the wake of this confrontation. "Your desperation is showing, Emma," Dr. Hayes sneered, a glimmer of mockery in his eyes. "I'll take this to management. I can assure you we will not stand for a display like this. Is anyone going to back me up?" I cried out, imploringly, glancing around at the faces of my colleagues who had once seemed like allies. "Is anyone going to say that this isn't one person's fault? We're in this together." But silence met my plea. An electric buzz filled the air, crackling with tension palpably horrifying. That was it. It felt as if the ground was slipping away from under my feet, just as despair threatened to wrap its shadowy fingers around my throat. A voice broke through, cutting into the thick fog of judgment. "Enough, Dr. Hayes." I turned in disbelief, my heart racing anew. The frail figure of Mr. Henderson, leaning heavily on a nurse's arm, stepped into view. His face, lined with age and suffering, bore the fierce glimmer of determination. "This isn't just one person's fault. It's time we took a good hard look at ourselves." But at that moment, I hung in suspended animation, teetering between hope and helplessness, the churning storm of reality surrounding me. What did this mean? Would someone finally defend me, or was this simply another layer in an already chaotic night? The air in the corridor felt electric as Mr. Henderson's frail figure took his stand. I couldn't believe he'd spoken up, not just for me, but for all of us. A wave of hope surged inside me, but it quickly collided with the stark reality of our situation. The tension didn't ease. Instead, it thickened, curling around us like smoke seeking a way out. "I've seen what you all go through," he rasped, his voice wavering, but mighty, filling the space around us with an unexpected authority. "You are not to blame for the failings of this place." Dr. Hayes' smirk faltered, but only for a moment. He regained his composure quickly, crossing his arms as if to shield himself, and shot a dark glance at me. "And what do you know about it, old man? You're barely coherent half the time." "Shut your mouth, Hayes," I said before I could stop myself. The shock of uncharacteristic defiance made me tremble slightly, but I didn't care, not anymore. My heart was pounding, and every part of me screamed to stand up for not just myself, but everyone, especially my patients. Mr. Henderson raised a bony finger, his determination brightening as he declared, "We deserve to be cared for, not treated as burdens." The words held such weight that for a brief moment I imagined the possibility of change, perhaps not just for me, but for everyone trapped within these walls. But they were all just thoughts flashing like lightning in my mind. far from reality. "Save it for someone who cares," Dr. Hayes snapped, turning away from us, dismissing the moment that might have ignited a fire we desperately needed. I noticed the way his shoulders tensed when he faced away, as if he feared the truth that hung in the air. But it was then, through the chaos of confrontation and whispers, that I glimpsed something. The edge of a torn document, the corner curling from where it was hastily shoved into the nurse's station. My heart quickened as I walked over, drawn by some instinct deep inside. It was a piece of paper I hadn't seen in the fray of the morning stress. Partially obscured, but compelling in its mystery, I crouched down, reaching for it, my fingers brushing against the cool surface. I could just make out a name in the signature line, but when I squinted, it was as if an icy finger traced my spine. The name wasn't familiar. As if entrapped, I found myself wrestling with an odd sense of dread. A realization began creeping in that this might not just highlight my struggles, but expose a deeper betrayal. "Emma, are you all right?" A voice broke through my racing thoughts. I looked up to Phi. "It's just," I stammered as my fingers gripped the paper tighter, the subtle detail of it demanding all my attention. The hasty signature belonged to someone who had no place in our care home, but the unsettling part was the slight smudge beside it, as if someone, maybe even me, had attempted to erase it from existence. "What was that?" Jody asked, moving closer. I hesitated for a second, caught between showing her and keeping it a secret. "It kind of looks like an authorization form," she prodded gently, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. I shook my head, breathing heavy. "No, it's more than that." With a quick glance at Dr. Hayes, who was now scrutinizing the paperwork at the nurse's station, I moved toward the nearest window. I held the paper close, unfolding. That was the same night Mr. Henderson received medication he wasn't supposed to. My voice was barely a whisper, realization sinking in like a stone plummeting into deep water. Before I could catch my breath, Jody reached out and peeked over my shoulder. Her eyes widened as she read it, the look of awestruck horror flashing in her pupils. "Emma, what does this mean?" "I think it means someone altered records. And not just for Mr. Henderson," I sighed, my breath hitching as unseen threads began to tug at the very fabric of our care home. "This isn't just a mistake, it's intentional." The thought wrapped around my heart like a vice. I could practically see the implications winding their way through the thin veneer of professionalism plastered over sterile linoleum. We were caught in a web spun by someone else, careless and devastating, with my own career dangling precariously at its center. "No, Emma," Jody urged, breaking my trance. "You have to be careful. If you start digging into this—" "I know, but if we don't, who will?" My voice trembled, but held stronger than ever. I could feel the previous fire ignite again, urging me forward, even as my heart sank deeper into uncertainty. If something's wrong, legally wrong, then I need to know the truth, for everyone. As I paused to think, the revelation clawed at me from every side. This was far more complex than I had imagined. These were not just mistakes, but a labyrinth of lies hidden throughout the night shift and my own innocence woven into the tapestry. The truth could collapse everything around me. But just then another figure emerged at the far end of the hallway. Lena, a nurse I trained with early on. She glanced at me, our eyes meeting, and for a fleeting instant, I thought I saw something flash in her gaze. Fear? Recognition? Whatever it was, slipped away almost as quickly as it had appeared. I didn't trust anything anymore, not even familiar faces. I turned my focus back to the paper, tracing the jagged edges of the torn document nervously, the symbols darkening and shifting, threatening to swallow me whole. Suddenly, a flurry of footsteps echoed down the corridor. I straightened quickly as Mr. Henderson's voice rose again, stronger than before. calling for me. Emma! He stepped toward me, determination etched into the lines of his face. You have to expose them. You must let it be known. His conviction pulled me in, igniting a surge of energy thrumming through my veins. The world around me fell silent as the two of us stood there, caught between the shadows of deceit and hope. But I felt the weight of countless layers of hidden truths, just waiting to reveal themselves. And that's when I understood something was about to break free, something far more significant than I had anticipated. An unexpected flicker, the dark twist I could never have foreseen. Suddenly, the air became electric again, and I braced for what was coming. In that moment, I realized someone knew the truth and had just let it slip. The air crackled with an intensity I hadn't felt before, a storm of emotions swirling around us, the echoes of Mr. Henderson's words still hanging heavy. I could see the disbelief shadowing my colleagues' faces, as if they were waiting for a punchline that wouldn't come. Me? The scapegoat? Not anymore. Enough, Dr. Hayes. I breathed, the pulse of adrenaline racing through me as I turned to face him, every ounce of vindication swelling in my chest. I realized then that this was our moment. The veil of silence was about to be ripped away. You've been exploiting this situation, manipulating us while we've been leaning on the edge of collapse. Exploiting? That's quite the accusation, he retorted, his voice dripping with disdain. But even he faltered for a brief moment. That inch of uncertainty was my opening. Yes, I cried, spurred on by the raw sincerity of Mr. Henderson's defiance. You've put us under immense pressure without providing any support, weaponizing the care of our patients as a means to control our actions. The words blurred together in my agitation, sharp and accusing, but somehow freeing. Dr. Hayes's suave veneer of authority began to crack. Sweat glistened on his brow as he glanced at the small crowd now gathering, my colleagues, the families, and even a few bystanders who had been alerted to the tension. They clocked in the simmering resentment, and I could feel ears straining toward the truth. Emma, don't be foolish. I've always prioritized patient care. Prioritized? You're hiding behind that facade while the residents are suffering. My voice, hoarse yet unyielding, silenced the room. Everywhere I looked, determination sparked in the faces of my colleagues, igniting echoes of solidarity I hadn't expected. Mrs. Bickle, a once timid presence, had her fragile lips pursed and her frail hands gripped tightly around the arm of her chair, as if she could hold on long enough to witness justice, not just for herself, but for all of us. She shook her head in disappointment, sending a wave of silence across the crowd. Spare us the self-righteous speech, Emma. You know nothing. Dr. Hayes defended himself desperately, eyes darting towards my colleagues. What do you think they'll believe over you? You showed negligence, and now you're throwing a tantrum to cover your own failings. The resentment I had felt towards him suddenly morphed into something else. Pity? I shook my head in defiance of that, allowing indignation to seep in again. If he expected an emotional show of weakness, he would be sorely disappointed. I turned, catching the gaze of Jody. There was a spark of understanding there. She'd seen more than anyone else realized. She'd lived the same tired farce repeatedly, while we buried our frustrations in silence. Then there was the document, still clutched in my hand, an ominous reminder of everything unraveling around us. You want proof? I asked, my voice steady as I stepped closer, disrupting the cycle of fear. I have signs that show this goes deeper than just my oversight. You can't keep blaming me when the documents reveal the truth. I lifted the torn paper for everyone to see, and an audible gasp reverberated through the crowd. The weight of those words hung heavily in the air, a palpable tension that choked all breath from the room. I could hear the whispers morphing from disbelief to curiosity, and I reveled in the sensation, power shifting like sand beneath our feet. Please, Emma, don't, Dr. Hayes stumbled, his facade cracking. You don't have to do this. I've helped you. You owe me. It was a transparent plea, desperation bleeding through those words like blood staining pristine fabric. For a flickering moment, I hesitated, thinking of how he had once praised my potential, the late nights he'd let slide. But then I looked past him, at the faces of our residents, their families anxiously watching. I thought again of Mr. Henderson, stepping forward in solidarity, a sacrifice of bravery igniting courage within me. "I don't owe you anything," I said firmly, my voice wrapping into a bow of finality. "What you've done is unconscionable. If you wanted the truth to remain hidden, you shouldn't have underestimated the people you manipulate. It ends here." The realization settled in all at once, the weight of it unshakable. I released the document, letting it flutter down like a fallen leaf, landing at Dr. Hayes's feet. It signified an irrevocable decision, a choice I no longer had the luxury of second-guessing. "Emma, please don't," he begged again, his bravado crumbling, but in that moment I felt no pity. Instead, there was clarity, a profound understanding of the consequences. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was about justice for so many unheard. Jody stepped from the crowd, her eyes unwavering. "No more sweeping this under the carpet," she declared boldly. Echoing my sentiment, "We'll stand as witnesses if we must." One after another, my colleagues began to speak up, demanding accountability, their voices converging into a storm, lifting each other as we storied our truths, not just about negligence in the charts, but the neglect of care that could destroy lives. The tension shifted dramatically, and suddenly, Hayes, the predator, no longer cloaked in the guise of authority. "I'm not the one being reckless here," he shouted, his voice strained, cracking under pressure. "This is just a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I interrupted, feeling the heat of passion surge through me. "You don't get to manipulate the system and cry for help when you're caught. You've put us all at risk, and it's time to face the consequences." The loud silence that followed enveloped us. I could hear the muted gasps and whispers from family members in the back, signaling a shift. The audience was no longer ours. The narrative had finally crumbled like the facade of power Hayes had hidden behind for far too long. Then Mr. Henderson stepped forward, pain etched across his features, but fiercely indignant. "Time's up for you, Hayes. You can't silence us anymore." His shaking hands raised defiantly, the frailty juxtaposed against immense determination. A grand gesture against the shadows that plagued us. "Is this your last desperate try for pity?" I challenged as I stepped closer to Hayes, who stood paralyzed between fear and remorse. "Make no mistake. This is about justice now, Dr. Hayes. No more manipulation. Do you understand?" As the room watched, locked in tension. It was clear this wasn't over. The cries for accountability rose, weaving in and out like a chaotic anthem until his denial hardened into stone. Realization dawning upon him. He had lost. "It's time for you to face your reckoning," I stated, and the moment felt alive with purpose. With each breath I took, I felt freer. The destructive cycle would finally break here, spilling into a truth that could change everything. "Should have realized," I said, standing my ground. "You can't chain the truth. This isn't just for me. It's for all of us." And with that single statement hanging heavily in the air, I felt a long-awaited release sweeping through me, a wave of catharsis rolling with tremendous force. The laughter of resilience echoed in my heart. At last, justice was no longer an afterthought. It was the dawn breaking, the winds shifting. The punchline was simple, yet fierce. From silence to unity, watch your empire crumble. Time has a way of marking moments in ways we often don't notice until they come banging at our door. Months slipped away since that fateful night, since everything in the care home was laid bare, where truth finally loosened the grip of fear. I moved through the days with renewed purpose, a quiet determination guiding every step. The fight had pushed me from the shadows, sparking freshness in me I hadn't felt in years. Not long after that confrontation, the nursing home decided to implement official changes. Staffing ratios were up, support systems were developed, and accountability was no longer a dirty word flung in whispers. I found a newfound voice. The team rallied around shared honesty, determined to do better for our residents. Leading the charge felt invigorating. The same people who once hesitated to speak now brought their stories and concerns to the forefront. I had found allies in unexpected places, even in the least likely of colleagues, and it forged a kind of camaraderie I had only dreamed of seeing. Looking back, it felt surreal. That night opened doors I hadn't even known existed. My nursing ambitions no longer felt like neat little boxes on a chart. They became real, vibrant goals that called to me. The feedback echoed through the halls. Families reached out. Some even wrote letters of gratitude. It struck a chord deep within me every single time. But the real change surged from within. I found a kind of joy in the day-to-day that I hadn't allowed myself before. Each night, as I trudged home, the weight of responsibility still settled in my bones, but it felt different now. The ache was layered with pride. My interactions with the residents transformed. No longer were they just patients. They were stories. It was in Mr. Henderson's room that I truly felt the impact. He'd become my unofficial mentor of sorts. Every chat we had, filled with shared laughter and glimmers of wisdom, reminded me why I chose this path. One afternoon, sitting idly together, he mentioned a line from his favorite poem, something about how footprints in the sand sometimes get washed away, but the essence of who walks remains. It struck me deep. Wasn't that what we were doing? Leaving something lasting in the worker bee motions of our shifts? Weeks turned to months, and then one day came a call from a local college. They wanted me to speak at their nursing seminar, to share my story, to inspire students who were about to step into the very challenges I once faced. My heart leaped at that. It felt unreal. Yet it felt right, too. I stood at that podium, hands shaking slightly, but my heart solid. I talked about the power of voice, the importance of standing up against the odds. Here I was, one ordinary nurse in a care home, now addressing a generation of future caregivers. Maybe those calamitous moments, once terrifying and overwhelming, your blessings in disguise. It was never about the chaos. It had always been the legacy left behind, the threads of change we wove for others to follow. Now, when I walk the halls, I don't just feel the weight anymore. I feel the lightness of purpose, a comforting blanket of resilience. And the truth is, it all began with an uncertain, shaky stand against injustice. A transformation rooted not just in my journey, but in ours together. The collective strength of anyone who understood that they had the power to change their narrative. Months had passed since that life-altering confrontation. The care home had transformed into a beacon of hope. But one ordinary night reminded me that our journey was far from over. As I prepared for my shift, a familiar anxiety nudged at me. I could just sense something brewing under the surface. Samuels hummed the soft jazz tune, but then I noticed the whispers among staff. A tension thick and heavy floated just beneath the friendly chatter. Jody caught my eye, her brow furrowed, and I could tell something simmered behind her usual cheer. "Emma, we need to talk," she said, beckoning me to the break room, her tone urgent. As soon as the door closed behind us, the weight of the world seemed to shift. "It's about Dr. Hayes," she said, glancing around as if he might appear at any moment. "What now?" I asked, a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. "It's not just him. There's talk of a board review. Some patients' families are stirring the pot, wanting accountability for everything that happened. It's escalating and causing ripples throughout the community." Her eyes darted nervously, betraying her worry. "You know the impact it's having, even months later." I took a deep breath. "I know it's been a challenge, but we've made real changes." It felt like a mantra. I questioned if I could keep rehashing the past and its pain along with this newfound light. "I get that, but is it enough?" Jody's voice was soaked with apprehension. What if they don't see it? It worried me, too. A persistent itch in my mind gnawed relentlessly. Our progress felt fragile. Could it withstand scrutiny? Let's not let fear anchor us, I said, my own resolve stealing with each word. We have to remind everyone what we've created. But it could bring it all back again, she said, resolutely grabbing my arm. You have to be careful. Watch your back, Emma. The weight of those words lingered. I suspected they were right. Rebuilding trust in the care home had been an uphill climb, but I was determined. I wouldn't let anyone sidetrack our journey. We had worked too hard. Still, the subtle tension coiled around me like a spring as the night went on, whispers that hinted at undermining efforts buried in bureaucratic webs. When I saw Mr. Henderson later that evening, his wizened face etched in concern, I knew I wasn't alone. Emma, he said quietly, I sense storms coming again. The air feels heavy with unresolved issues. We'll stand strong together, I promised. We're not backing down. That night morphed into one of those moments every nurse dreads. A sudden code blue rang through the air like a siren call. The intensity struck, adrenaline igniting amongst us as we rushed to the emergency. Accessories to nerve-wracking urgency flashed about. Time vanished as we triaged care, connecting with residents who had become family. When the chaos faded, I emerged nearly breathless, skin prickling, clutching the remnants of what felt like a battleground. But in the aftermath, I couldn't shake the sense that our pillars of strength needed fortification. I gathered that night's crew, the ones who had once hidden within the shadows alongside me. We face challenges, and the tides aren't done turning. I addressed them, an urgency rising in my chest. But we've built something worth fighting for. Whatever the board decides, let's not lose sight of who we are. Jody's hand rose, a spark igniting in the dark. And who we protect. From that night, we made sure our voices echoed through every meeting, every interaction, unwavering in solidarity. It was a persistent ripple, a powerful undercurrent that carried the weight of our newfound resolve. In the weeks that followed, the board review approached with a specific date looming on the horizon. Jody and I decided to gather our supporters, the families who had stood by us since those tumultuous nights. Through letters, conversations, and shared experiences, we created a united front as we walked into that meeting room, the electric atmosphere invigorating. We claimed our space, sharing our stories, our triumphs alongside our fears. Mr. Henderson told his tale, weaving through how our care tied into humanity, how it transformed not just lives, but gave hope to families. The connection shifted something deep within the room, making it visible, the commitment to the people we were meant to serve. When the conclusions wove themselves into a final agreement, the outcomes didn't simply reflect policy, but reflected the heart behind our care. It was a testament to what we had built. There would be checks, balances, funding, and a new path of accountability. As we left the meeting, something settled inside me, something light, stronger than fear. I turned to Jody, her tired eyes. Finding peace watching the sunset over the sea was a new ritual I adopted. My hand brushed against the cool surface of the railing as I soaked in the moment. It was time to move on from the shadows. The colors wrapped around me, gentle reminders that as much as change was difficult, it could also yield new beginnings. Sometimes lengths of time loomed long, yet here was clarity. The truth could not and would not be silenced. In those moments, I understood this was just the start of many stories still waiting to unfold. Neighbors in our journey, still whispering shared struggles under the glow of a coast's soft smile. So with gratitude and an unyielding spirit, I walk back, ready for whatever paths tomorrow might unveil. With stories ready to connect us for good. Keep your eyes peeled for the next chapter of our journey. Subscribe immediately so you don't miss our next exclusive stories. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request.